King John's life began on a chilly winter night, December 24, 1166, in the heart of England. He was born into the powerful Plantagenet dynasty, a name synonymous with strength and resilience. But amidst this grandeur, John's birth was overshadowed by the presence of his older brothers, Richard the Lionheart, Geoffrey, and Henry the Young King, each a formidable figure in their own right. Imagine growing up with such a formidable family lineage, where every move you make is scrutinized and every decision questioned. It's a daunting prospect, especially when you're not the favored son. John's inheritance was meager, to say the least, a paltry £5,000, a fraction of what his brothers received. This meager share of land earned him the nickname Lackland, a name that would haunt him for the rest of his life. The lack of land wasn't the only thing that set John apart from his brothers. He was also the youngest of the group, often relegated to the sidelines as his older siblings took center stage. It's a situation that can foster insecurity, resentment, and a deep-seated need for validation. John's brothers, particularly Richard, were the epitome of chivalry and bravery, their exploits in the Crusades cementing their legendary status. In contrast, John's early life was marked by a sense of inadequacy, a feeling that he had to work twice as hard to prove himself. As the years passed, John's insecurities only deepened. He struggled to find his place within the family, often feeling like an afterthought. His brothers, now established as powerful leaders in their own right, seemed to have no qualms about belittling him or undermining his authority. The air was thick with tension, and John's every move was watched and waiting to be pounced upon. This toxic dynamic would ultimately shape John's worldview, teaching him that power was everything and that the only way to survive was to be ruthless. He became adept at manipulation, using his cunning and charm to get what he wanted. But beneath this facade, John was a complex web of emotions, anger, fear, and insecurity all swirling together like a toxic cocktail. As the years went by, the power struggles between John and his brothers only intensified. Richard, now King of England, would often mock John's lack of land and his perceived weakness. Geoffrey, on the other hand, would try to manipulate John, using their shared mother's influence to further his own interests. And Henry, the young king, would simply dismiss John as a nuisance, a mere obstacle to be overcome. It's against this backdrop that John's character begins to take shape. A man forged in the fire of insecurity and struggle, he's constantly searching for validation and recognition. His ambition knows no bounds, but so does his paranoia. He's a man trapped in a never-ending cycle of fear and resentment, always waiting for the other shoe to drop. As we explore the life of King John, it's essential to remember that he's not just a historical figure. He's a human being, flawed and vulnerable. His story is a complex tapestry of emotions, motivations, and choices, all woven together to create a rich and nuanced portrait of a man forever trapped in his own shadow. As the youngest son of King Henry II, John grew up amidst a whirlwind of power struggles and sibling rivalry. His brothers, Henry, Richard, and Geoffrey, were all vying for attention and favor from their father, leaving John feeling like an afterthought. Born on December 24, 1166, John's early life was marked by the absence of a title and a lack of inheritance, earning him the nickname Lackland. But it was the presence of Richard the Lionheart that cast the longest shadow over John's childhood. Richard, the eldest son, was the undisputed heir to the throne, and his charismatic personality only fueled the jealousy and competition that simmered among the siblings. As the years passed, John watched as Richard's star continued to rise, earning him titles, lands, and the adoration of their father. In contrast, John's own prospects seemed bleak. He was constantly reminded of his inferior status, and his father's favor was always bestowed upon his older brothers. The tension between the siblings was palpable, with Richard and John frequently clashing over issues of power and privilege. Their father, attempting to mediate the disputes, often found himself torn between his love for his youngest son and his duty to secure the future of the kingdom. This toxic environment took a toll on John's mental health. He grew increasingly paranoid, always wondering when his father would acknowledge him as a worthy successor. The lack of trust and understanding from his family members only exacerbated his insecurities, driving him to become even more ambitious yet harsh. John began to see the world as a treacherous place, where only the strongest survived, and he was determined to prove himself as the most capable ruler. As John navigated the treacherous waters of court politics, he struggled to find his place among his brothers and their father. His father's favor was always fleeting, and John's attempts to earn it only seemed to end in disappointment. He became increasingly isolated, relying on his own wit and cunning to survive in a world where his family seemed determined to keep him down. But John's insecurities ran far deeper than just his family relationships. He was haunted by the fear of being cast aside, of being forgotten and replaced by his more favored brothers. This fear drove him to seek power and control at any cost, often leading him to make reckless decisions that would haunt him for the rest of his life. The seeds of John's paranoia and insecurity were sown in the earliest days of his childhood, in the shadow of his powerful brothers and their father's favor. As he grew older, these feelings only intensified, shaping him into the complex and often cruel leader that would one day come to define his reign. But what drove John to become this way? Was it simply the product of a difficult childhood, or was there something more at play? The story of King John's life is one of intrigue, power struggles, and the human condition. It's a tale of how fear, rivalry, and insecurity can twist someone's choices, leading them down a path of destruction and chaos. As we explore the life of King John, we'll delve into the complexities of his personality, examining the events and circumstances that shaped him into the man he became. We'll explore the politics, power struggles, and family dynamics that drove him to make the choices he did, and we'll examine the consequences of those decisions. But before we can understand the complexities of John's reign, we need to understand the person behind the crown. We need to see the vulnerability, the fear, and the insecurity that drove him to become the leader he was. And that's exactly what we'll do in the next part of this story. As the curtain closed on the tumultuous reign of King Henry II, the Plantagenet dynasty was left to pick up the pieces. Amidst the power struggle, one young prince, John, stood poised to make his mark. His participation in the Third Crusade, alongside his brother Richard the Lionheart, was about to become a defining moment in his life. The year was 1190, and the Holy Land beckoned. King Richard, fresh from his conquests in France, had embarked on a perilous journey to reclaim Jerusalem from the enemy. His younger brother, John, eager to prove himself, begged to join the crusade. To his surprise, Richard agreed, and the two brothers set off towards the eastern horizon. As they traversed the treacherous terrain, John began to emerge from the shadow of his more illustrious sibling. He demonstrated bravery and leadership skills, earning the respect of his comrades. In the scorching desert, John's resourcefulness proved invaluable, and his brother began to see him in a new light. The experience had a profound impact on John. He returned to England with a newfound sense of purpose, but it was short-lived. The devastating consequences of the Third Crusade still lingered: the loss of lands in France, the crippling debt, and the growing discontent among the nobles. John's insecurities were about to reach a boiling point. The fall of Normandy in 1204 marked the beginning of the end for John's reign. He had lost the key to his kingdom, and with it, his grip on power began to slip. The once mighty Plantagenet dynasty was now on the brink of collapse. John's paranoia and desperation grew, as he became increasingly isolated from his nobles. As the years went by, John's mental state began to deteriorate. He became convinced that his enemies were closing in on him, and that his life was in constant danger. He turned to his advisors, but they seemed more interested in their own gain than in providing genuine counsel. The once promising prince had become a shell of his former self, consumed by his own fears and doubts. The loss of his Norman territories was a bitter pill to swallow. John's inability to protect his kingdom had left him feeling powerless and humiliated. He became withdrawn and isolated, unable to connect with his people or his nobles. The weight of his responsibilities had broken him, and he was no longer the man he once was. As the Magna Carta loomed on the horizon, John's fate was all but sealed. The document, a testament to the power of the nobles, was a direct result of John's inability to rule effectively. He had lost the trust of his people, and his reign was coming to a close. The once feared king had become a laughingstock, a relic of a bygone era. In the end, it was not the loss of his kingdom that defined King John, but his inability to cope with the pressures of power. He was a complex, flawed individual, driven by a deep-seated insecurity and a desperate need for validation. His story serves as a reminder that even the most powerful among us can fall, and that the weight of our choices can be crushing. As King John's reign continued to spiral downward, the English nobles began to assert their power. They had long been frustrated by the king's arbitrary rule, arbitrary taxes, and disregard for the law. The seeds of rebellion were sown, and the nobles saw an opportunity to limit the king's authority. In 1215, a group of barons, led by Stephen Langton, the Archbishop of Canterbury, gathered at Runnymede, a meadow near Windsor Castle. They demanded that King John agree to a charter that would protect their rights and limit his power. The Magna Carta, as it came to be known, was a document that would change the course of history. The Magna Carta was not a radical concept. It was a compromise between the nobles and the king. However, King John was reluctant to sign it, seeing it as a threat to his authority. He had grown accustomed to doing as he pleased, and the idea of submitting to a charter that would govern his actions was unthinkable. Despite his reservations, King John was faced with a reality check. His nobles were no longer willing to tolerate his abuse of power, and they had the support of the church. The Archbishop of Canterbury, Stephen Langton, was a powerful ally, and he had the backing of Pope Innocent III. The king was in a vulnerable position, and he knew it. In June 1215, King John reluctantly agreed to sign the Magna Carta. It was a significant moment in English history, marking a shift in the balance of power between the monarch and the nobility. The document established the principle that the king was not above the law, and that even he was subject to the rule of law. The Magna Carta had far-reaching consequences. It protected the rights of the nobles and limited the king's power to tax and wage war without their consent. It also established the principle of due process, ensuring that no one, including the king, could be imprisoned or punished without a fair trial. As King John signed the Magna Carta, he was signing away his absolute power. He was acknowledging that he was not a god-king, but a human being subject to the laws and customs of his kingdom. It was a significant concession, and one that would have far-reaching implications for the future of England. The signing of the Magna Carta was a major blow to King John's authority, and it marked the beginning of the end of his reign. He would continue to fight against the nobles and the church, but he could never regain the power and control he had once enjoyed. The Magna Carta had changed the game, and King John was no longer the supreme ruler of England. As we look back on King John's story, it's clear that the Magna Carta was a turning point in his reign. He had been a flawed and ambitious man, but the document marked the beginning of the end of his authoritarian rule. It was a reminder that even the most powerful among us must submit to the rule of law, and that no one, including the king, is above the law. The Magna Carta was a beacon of hope for a fairer and more just society, and its legacy continues to inspire us to this day. As we near the end of our story about King John, it's time to reflect on the lasting impact of his reign. His legacy is a complex tapestry, woven from the threads of power struggles, rebellions, and the establishment of the English Parliament. One of the most significant consequences of King John's rule was the growth of the English Parliament. Though he initially resisted the idea, the nobles eventually forced him to accept their demands. The Parliament's creation marked a significant shift in the balance of power between the monarch and the nobles, limiting the king's authority and setting a precedent for future generations. But beyond the politics, King John's story also offers a poignant reminder of the human cost of insecurity and struggle. As a young prince, he was constantly overshadowed by his powerful brothers, never truly trusted or validated. This created a sense of inadequacy that drove him to become the very thing he feared, a ruthless and suspicious ruler. Despite his flaws, King John was a complex individual, driven by a deep-seated desire to prove himself. His insecurities, though painful to witness, make him a relatable figure, a reminder that even the most powerful among us can struggle with feelings of inadequacy. As we look back on King John's story, we're left with a series of questions. What can we learn from his struggles? How can we apply the lessons of history to our own lives? And what does his legacy say about the nature of power and leadership? The answers, much like King John's story, are multifaceted and open to interpretation. But one thing is clear. His life serves as a reminder that even the most flawed among us can hold a mirror to the complexities of human nature. As we close this chapter on King John's life, we invite you to share your thoughts on his legacy and the relevance of his story to modern times. How do you think his insecurities and struggles relate to your own experiences? What lessons can we take away from his story? If you're interested in exploring more historical content, including the stories of other Plantagenet rulers, be sure to check out our other videos. And if you'd like to learn more about King John's life and legacy, we've included a link to a relevant article in the description below. As we move forward, let's remember the complexities of King John's story and the importance of empathy in understanding the lives of historical figures. His legacy may be a cautionary tale, but it's also a reminder that we're all human, with our own struggles and insecurities.